Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Have you ever wondered why translating a book, a movie title, or even a simple slogan isn't as straightforward as just swapping words using a bilingual dictionary? Why is that a direct word for word translation can sometimes sound completely ridiculous or even lose its meaning? The answer lies in translation theory, a rich and fascinating field. Today we will thoroughly learn about it. To start with absolute basics, what exactly is translation theory? Many people may make the mistake of assuming translation is purely a mechanical task, that language is just a set of labels attached to objects, and translating simply means replacing word A in English with word B in Spanish, French, or Hindi. But language doesn't operate in a vacuum. Language is deeply bound up with culture, history, emotions, and societal norms. Translation theory is the systematic study of how meaning is transformed from a source language, which we call SL, to a target language, which we call TL. It gives us a theoretical framework to answer critical questions. Should a translator remain strictly loyal to the original author's exact grammar and structure, or should they adapt the text so it reads naturally for a modern audience, when it is okay to change the metaphor or an idiom? As we will see, different scholars across centuries have answered these questions in a very different way. The conflict between transliteration and transcreation is central to translation studies. Transliteration focuses on word to word translation, whereas transcreation focuses on creativity. Now we will focus on one of the most important starting points in modern semiotics and translation studies, which comes from Russian American linguist Roman Jakobson. In his landmark 1959 essay on linguistic aspects of translation, Jakobson argued that translation isn't just about moving between two national languages. He divided translation into three distinct categories. First, we have the intralingual translation, or what Jakobson called reverting. This is the interpretation of verbal signs using other signs within the same language. For example, when you paraphrase a complex academic sentence into simpler English, or when modern scholars update Shakespeare's Elizabethan English into contemporary American English, that is, intralingual translation. Secondly, we have interlingual translation or translation proper. This is what most people traditionally think of when they hear the word translation. Moving meaning from one distinct language into another, like translating Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace from Russian into English. Third, and perhaps most fascinating, is intersemiotic translation or transmutation. This occurs when we translate meaning from a verbal system into a non-verbal system, or vice versa. Think about adapting a written novel into a film score, turning a poem into a painting, or converting spoken words into sign language or visual infographics. Jakobson showed us that translation is fundamentally about interpretation across different sign systems. The relation between intra-translation, intertranslation, and intersemiotic translation laid the foundation of the modern translation theory possible. Now let's step back in history to the late 17th century. In 1680, the famous English poet and dramatist John Dryden wrote a celebrated preface to his translation of Ovid's epistle, where he proposed a classic triad that dominated translation debates for generations. Dryden categorized all translation into three specific methods. Number one is metaphrase. This is strict, literal, word for word, and line by line translation. Dryden strongly criticized metaphrase, famously remarking that expecting a translator to stick strictly to word for word translation is like asking a performer to dance on a rope with fettered legs. It destroys the natural beauty and flow of the text. Number two is paraphrase. This was Dryden's preferred method. Paraphrase is sense for sense translation. Here, the translator keeps the author's original meaning and intent in full view, but re engages with the grammar and syntax of the target language. So the final text reads eloquently and naturally. Number three is imitation. This is extreme adaptation, where the translator takes complete liberty with the text, changing setting, character names, cultural references, and plot details, using the original text merely as a vague guidebook. Dryden argued that paraphrase strikes the ultimate balance between respect for the original author and artistic freedom for the translator. So, in short, metaphrase is literal translation, paraphrase is translation of sense, imitation is creative freedom. Moving into the 20th century, we meet one of the most influential figures in modern translation studies, the American linguist Eugene Nida. In the 1960s, while working on large scale Bible translation projects around the world, Nida realizes that traditional methods failed when dealing with cultures that had entirely different social structures and environments. In his seminal 1964 book, Towards a Science of Translating, Nida introduces two core concepts that every student of literature must know. That is, formal equivalence and dynamic equivalence. Formal equivalence strictly focuses on the source text structures. It aims to reproduce the exact syntax, vocabulary, idioms, and grammatical structures of the original source text. This approach prioritizes precision and accuracy over readability. It's ideal for legal documents and medical texts or academic research where exact wording is paramount. On the other hand, dynamic equivalence, which Nida later calls functional equivalence, focuses entirely on the target reader's response. The goal here is not to match words, but to recreate the exact emotional and cognitive impact on the target reader that the original text had on its original audience. For example, if a biblical phrase mentions a white lamb as a symbol of purity, but a translator is working with an indigenous community that has never seen a lamb, a strict formal translation might confuse the reader. A dynamic translator might substitute it with a white cow, to convey the exact same cultural resonance of innocence. Nida's ultimate conclusion was that there is no such thing as an identical translation. Our goal must always be finding the closest natural equivalent. In 1970s and 1980s, German scholar Hans Vermeer initiated a major shift away from purely linguistic approaches with what he called Skopos theory. Skopos is the ancient Greek word for purpose or goal. Vermeer argued that a translation should not be judged primarily by how closely it mirrors the source text, but rather by whether it successfully fulfills its intended purpose in the target culture. According to Skopos theory, the target audience and the function of translation dictate the strategy you must choose. Let us look at three practical scenarios. Firstly, if you are translating a literary novel, your scopus is aesthetic appreciation, emotional resonance, and narrative tone. Secondly, if you are translating a corporate contract or financial report, your scopus is legal accuracy and zero ambiguity. And finally, if you are doing commercial marketing or transcreation, your scopus is driving sales in the local market. By the 1990s, the field experienced what Scholar calls the cultural turn, spearheaded by theorists like Susan Bassett, Andre Lefebvre, and most prominently, American translation theorist Lawrence Venuti. Venuti, in his 1995 influential book, The Translator's Invisibility, made a passionate critique of translation practice in the Anglo American world. He pointed out that over 80% of the translation published in English were heavily domesticated. What does that mean? Domestication is a strategy where foreign culture markers, unusual phrasing, and unfamiliar concepts are smoothed out so that the translation reads effortlessly, as if it were originally written in English. Venuti argued that domestication makes the translator completely invisible and acts as an act of cultural imperialism, wiping away the foreignness of other cultures to make them comfortable for Western readers. To counter this, Venuti championed foreignization. Foreignization intentionally retains foreign linguistic choices, cultural idioms, and sentence structures. It deliberately forces the reader out of their comfort zone, reminding them at every turn that they are engaging with a distinct, valuable foreign culture. So the question becomes, do we bring the author to the reader through domestication, or do we take the reader to the author through foreignization? To bring all these concepts together, take a look at the comparative chart on the screen right now. On the left, we have formal equivalence, which operates at roughly 85% source fidelity, making it perfect for legal and academic work. Next is dynamic equivalence, which balances source meaning with a 75% focus on target reader response, ideal for literature, religious texts, and general prose. Then we have Skopos theory, which ranks highest at 95% for goal driven focus. It adapts flexibly based on whatever practical functions the job demands. And finally, transcreation, which was coined by the founder of Writers' Workshop, Purushottam Lal. Transcreation gives maximum creative adaptation for advertising, branding, and multimedia localization. Seeing this side by side shows us that no single translation theory is correct. Each provides a specialized tool for different genres and media. One thing that I will suggest my audience to do is find out the interrelation between all these translation theories. For example, how formal equivalence is similar or different to transliteration or metaphrasis. Let's quickly map out these theoretical journey chronologically so you can easily memorize it for your notes or exams. We started in the classical era with Cicero, Saint Jerome, and later John Dryden, debating the raw tension between word for word versus sense for sense translation. In the 1960s, Eugene Nida and Roman Jakobson brought a scientific linguistic framework to the discipline through equivalence theory and semiotics. In the 1970s and 80s, Hans Vermeer gave us the functionalist goal-oriented Skopos theory. And in 1990, cultural turn brought power dynamics, ideology, and translator visibility in the forefront. Now that we have covered the major theoretical models, let's look at 4 practical, real-world challenges every translator faces on a daily basis. Challenge number 1: idiomatic expression. Phrases like "it's raining cats and dogs" or "kick the bucket" cannot be translated word for word without losing their sense entirely. Translators must locate equivalent cultural idioms in the target language. Challenge number 2 is cultural gaps and untranslatability. Concept like the Portuguese word saudade, a deep melancholic longing for something or someone loved and lost, or the German word, don't have a direct single word equivalent in English. Translator must decide whether to use descriptive phrasing, borrow the word directly, or add explanatory footnotes. Challenge number 3 is grammatical and syntactic difference. Languages organize time, gender, and voice differently. For example, some languages require gendered pronouns for objects, while others have no grammatical gender at all. Challenge number 4 is pragmatic register. Navigating formal versus informal forms of address like tu versus vous in French or du versus sei in German requires deep social awareness of hierarchical structures in both cultures. It is the task of a translator to overcome all these challenges using appropriate theoretical tools and methods, keeping in mind the main purpose of translation. This brings us to the modern era. What about artificial intelligence, machine translation, or large language models? Will AI render human translators and translation theory obsolete? The short answer is absolutely no. While tools like neural machine translation can process thousands of words per second and perform formal linguistic matching, and they perform with high efficiency, AI lacks human consciousness, cultural intuition, humor, and true intentionality. AI often fails into the trap of over domestication or mechanical literalism. This is precisely why understanding translation theory is more valuable today than ever before. It allows human experts to evaluate machines. And that brings us to the end of our masterclass on translation theory. We covered everything from Jakobson's semiotics and Dryden's triad to Nida's equivalence, Vermeer's Skopos theory, Venuti's foreignization, and the future of AI. Thank you for watching the video. See you next time.